Thanks so much to everyone who's here. I'm astounded at how many people, and it's not doing anything to help my personal insecurity, but thank you so much for being here. Obviously, because I'm giving a talk on insecurity, I've spent the entire week racked by insecurity and imposter syndrome. Because unlike Dr. Adams in the comic I've put up, I am not a social psychologist. And I'm not actually necessarily an expert on insecurity in the general. I'm a 46-year-old woman, and I've done in that time a lot of living and a lot of failing and some succeeding. And I thought that, well, the one thing I am an expert on is my own insecurity journey. It's something I've traveled alongside myself for some time. And I'm just going to take you through some of my stories and some of the tools that I've used to manage my insecurity and to work with it to come to a positive place. But before I go straight into that, I just wanted to put out my perspective on insecurity. Because like Daniel was saying, it's basically taken a global pandemic for us to start facing up to our feelings and taking them seriously. And quite frankly, after 3 months, it's been quite a lot. And being alone has forced a lot of us to acknowledge and face some of the more negative feelings that when we're out in the world and are incredibly busy are very easy to run away from. And personally, I've been dealing with probably the ones we all have, like lots of loneliness, lots of rage, lots of anger, and huge big doses of fear. Fear about the disease, fear about the future, fear about the economy. It's very easy to be stuck in those places. And often I've been feeling quite wrong for even having these feelings, because the world is constantly giving us messages that we need to be happy and okay all the time, and that any deviation from this so-called normal is a big problem, and then we must fix it, like there's something wrong and we have to fix it, and we're not allowed to just feel into and flow with these so-called negative feelings. And personally, I don't believe that's true, and I think there's a healthier way to live. And one of the healthier ways is to just accept that we are incredibly complex mixes of emotions and feelings and thoughts, and that we've got to learn to live with them. Because to my mind, shadow stuff, the darker stuff, the sort of the less light stuff is very important. It creates texture, it creates depth, and it's the moment of suggestion that something in our life needs to change. When we're uncomfortable, or when we are dealing with resentment, or dealing with a bit of anger, these are signposts. And insecurity is a really beautiful signpost or guide for us. And it can tell us where we start to need to pay attention, and what kind of action is necessary for us to figure out what the next path is. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't see insecurity as a problem. I see it as a sort of a slightly difficult friend. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is basically that feeling that you are a complete fraud, and that any success in your life is some kind of dumb luck or happy accident, and that at any point can be taken away from you. And it's real, it's incredibly common. And in fact, personally, I think if anyone tells you they have never experienced imposter syndrome, they're either lying or a complete sociopath. So just, yeah, for those of us, I think we live in this world, like particularly the Instagram world of the uber confident. It's easy to feel when you're in a moment of insecurity that you are the only one and that it's wrong. And it's not. It's a shared experience. It's a global experience. And so the next step is for me to tell you about some of the things that are in my insecurity toolbox. I love this picture, mainly because the back box looks exactly like the cassette tape box I had when I was a child, mainly filled with U2 tapes. So Yeah, I'm going to take you through some of the moments of my my most extreme insecurity. They're not the only moments of my insecurity, but the ones that are probably most interesting, and then tell you about some of the tools that I use to get through them. So I think the first time I hit a moment of debilitating insecurity was when I shut down my first business, which was a PR company called Sentient Communications. And I'd been running it for about 9 years. And when it ended, I didn't know who I was without that business. I spent the first 6 months after I'd shut it down, when people asked me what I did, I would tell them that I used to run a PR agency. Like, my identity was so interwoven with that business after so many years that I really battled to know what next or what was possible for me. And this brings me to the first tool that I used extensively and continue to use a lot, which is you have to find your heart friends. And these are people who are strong and fierce and ruthlessly hold you to your truth. And what I love about my heart friends is that they refuse to let me sink into self-pity, and they refuse to let me stay in the moment of inaction vortex swirling in my insecurity or in my imposter syndrome-ness. And they're very important to me. And I love them all very, very much, because without them, I would not be able to see who I am in the world. You know, when we're stuck in our own heads, it's very hard to see your strengths. And it can be, particularly when you're dealing with an insecure moment, it's very hard to see that it was ever okay. Like, I sometimes live, particularly when I'm feeling insecure, in the land of always never. So suddenly it was never okay. I was never good at anything. I'm not capable. And then by talking to my heart friends, I'm able to see that that is not exactly true. Just to be clear, this isn't like a hype girl thing. It's not, these aren't people like hashtagging in the back, you go girl. It's not that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes they do that, but it's a much more deep and honest communication, and really getting into what is the truth of the story. So tool number one is find your heart people and cultivate strong, forceful relationships with them. The second moment was big moment was when my second business majestically imploded. So Sentient had failed very elegantly. So I had shut it down beautifully. It had been a very conscious moment of taking time. And Batstone was like this. It was like one day it was there and the next day it wasn't. Batstone was for those of you interested, was a go-to-market agency for startups. And I was stunned, because I had thought with the closure of Sentient that I had somehow immunized myself against business failure. I mean, who has two businesses that don't work? And it had not occurred to me that this wouldn't work. I hadn't set myself up for that at all. So when it ended, it felt like the world had ended. And I was convinced that there was nowhere for me to go. Like, out of everything I had learned, everything I'd done in my life, it was all useless and there was nothing to do. And my friend Alex brought me into a very big project. And I couldn't believe it, because clearly I was incapable of delivering on this project. And she was convinced that I could. And I thought, well, Alex is smart. She's successful. She knows what she's doing. And she thinks I can do this. So I used tool number 2, which is I outsourced my confidence. I didn't feel confident in myself, but Alex was confident in me, and she wasn't an idiot. So I just worked on her confidence in me, and I did that for about 4 or 5 months. And it was like medicine for my insecurity, because after 5 or 6 months, I'd insourced it. And I was like, look at me, I can do this work. I'm doing a pretty good job. We are helping, it was an incubation project. We're helping these startups grow and develop. And so sometimes when you can't find it in yourself, it's perfectly good to outsource it to other people. And that brings me to my third moment, which I'm semi still living in, which is the role that I have now. So I've moved out of like almost 20 years of strategic communications into a people ops position. And when I was offered this role by our lovely CEO, Sam, he said he wanted me to take on the role of chief people officer. And I was like, don't be ridiculous. Like, I don't know anything about HR. And he said, exactly, like he doesn't want anyone with HR. And then I was like, well, then I'm perfect. But the result is that I spent the first 6 months in the position thinking every day, waking up every day thinking, is today the day that Sam takes me into the office and says, we've made a terrible mistake. Like, I'm so sorry, Sarah, but this little experiment isn't working. And I used tools 1 and 2 hugely. Probably bored my poor friends to death with my constant need for like, how am I doing? How am I doing? I'm doing this. How does that sound to you? Like, really talking to them. I outsourced my confidence to Sam because every day that he didn't take me into his office, told me it wasn't working. I was like, he has confidence in me. We're going to be okay. And then I learned a third tool, care of my incredible therapist, which is to separate the feelings from the facts. So my feeling of insecurity was valid, but it wasn't actually based on truth. And the truth is that I have skills. Like, I understand culture, I understand leadership, I understand internal communications. And while I don't have some of the HR backing, I can learn. I have 46 years of learning behind me. I have proven to myself over and over again that I can work with data. And the brilliant thing is that HR is not a talent. Like, it's not something I can't learn. And slowly, through lots of talking and thinking and reflecting, I was able to separate the feeling of insecurity with the facts of my life. And that gave me a sense of what the next action was. What was the thing that I could do in order to manage and placate and talk with my insecurity? So when you are having those intense moments of insecurity, to just acknowledge the feelings. They're absolutely fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with feeling insecure, but then start to separate the truth of your story. And that brings me to my next tool, which is that you have to dance with your insecurities. When you start to acknowledge the feelings and the facts, it really gives you an opportunity to have a conversation with your insecurities and to link arms with it and to have a conversation like you would with a friend. So what I started to work with is that I had the insecurity I have around my job. So the first thing was I didn't have the data of HR. So there was while I had managed people before and I had some good instincts, I didn't have the data. So the insecurity was there, and I was able to say, like, what is needed here? Like, what is needed for me to get over this feeling? And what I needed was access to data. So I found an HR coach, and thank goodness, he knows way more than I do. And every time I hit a challenge, I'm able to call him and get the information I need and move forward with my business. And the other thing was, like, with that was deep insecurity about that element of the job. So what I did is I started to work with my strengths rather than my weaknesses. And I built a foundation based on what I know around internal communications and what I know about culture and what I know about building good leaders. And using that as a foundation, I've been able to move forward into the areas that I'm not so strong in yet, because I'm building all the time. So my insecurity is not a permanent state. It's not fixed. I can take action and I can strengthen myself and I can find my ways through it. But it can only happen if you're having a conversation with your insecurities. You have to make friends with them. They're just trying to help you. not always in the most productive ways, but they're not actually trying to bring you to your knees. They're trying to tell you where you need to grow. And so the question for me is always, what is needed here? And that brings me to number 5, tool number 5, which is the fact that we've got to, all of us, must find and nurture our practice. What is the thing that brings you home to yourself? When I'm feeling insecure, I have like a whirlwind going on in my brain. It's I can't think about anything else. It's a lot of negative talk, and it feels like some sort of hurricane. And often it's only the practice, the thing that brings me home to myself, that can shut down that craziness. And this can be anything. For many of us, it's journaling. For some people, other people, I haven't got into it yet. For some people, it's yoga. It can be surfing. It can be drawing. It can be coloring in those adult coloring in books. It can be crocheting. Like, what is your thing? What is the thing that connects you deeply to who you are outside of this crazy chattering brain? And what I find when I'm going through, so when I'm not just in spikes of insecurity, when I'm in a state of insecurity around something that I'm facing, it's often the first thing that I drop. I don't have time for it. I can't create space for it. It feels like the world is crowding in. And then if I can just take a moment, and I recently discovered crocheting, which I absolutely love. And if I could just take a moment and just like make a granny square, it'll take me completely out of the kind of the nightmare noise of my brain, and I can find my way back to myself. And then from that point of strength, come back into the conversation with my insecurity. So for me, tool number 5 is to find a practice, whatever that is. And the practices change, which is totally good. So those are my 5 tools. So finding my heart people, outsourcing my confidence, separating feelings from facts, asking my insecurities what is needed, and finding my practice. And it's from this place, working with all these tools simultaneously often, that I'm able to continue to move out into the world and continue to adventure and to take risks and to be brave and to work with the deep insecurities that I continue to face every single day and find my way through. And I'm really hoping that in the chat, you guys will share some of your tools with me, because these are just mine and they're very specific to the journey that I've led. And I don't know how many participants, we got 67 participants. So there's 67 other tools out in the world. And I think it would be so useful if we could just share them with each other and find out what works. And thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.